Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 16 of season 2 of Star Wars The Clone Wars called Shroud of Darkness. Now this is one of those episodes that's really right up my alley. It really delves into the lore of the Jedi, the Force, things like that, and we get some really nice nods to the previous Star Wars EU. So let's just kind of get right into things. And of course, the main thing here is Ahsoka, Kanan, and Ezra going to the Jedi Temple on Lothal, discovering there's a hidden layer underneath of it, and then all of them having some kind of visions that sort of help them deal with what's going on with them. Kanan's main thing is having this vision of one of the Jedi Temple guards, and this guard saying, like, look, Ezra is he's drawn to the dark side. The way things are going, one of these days you're going to get yourself killed, and then he'll become a disciple of evil. I mean, they've already sort of hinted with Seven Sister saying that she'd be willing to train Ezra as an inquisitor. That that might really be kind of his fate. I mean, it was even hinted back as far as season one that Ezra is somebody that could potentially be lured into the path of the dark side. Now, this is where stuff starts to get really cool for me. For example, the dojo where the temple guard is hanging out, and the way he's sitting, and just the design of the place. A good friend of mine is very heavily into iaido, type of Japanese dueling, and just from stuff I've picked up from him and pictures I've seen posts of him, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's obviously some genuine cues taken from stuff like that in that scene. And then there's the whole bit with the temple guards. Now, again, this is drawing from the old Star Wars lore, particularly a lot of the Star Wars video games, where temple guards were exactly what it sounds like: guards whose job it was to protect the Jedi temple. And these are guys who were full-fledged Jedi, and it was always really kind of heavily implied that these were guys who were pretty serious badasses. I mean, their job was to protect the Jedi Temple itself from anybody who wanted to mess with the Jedi. And given some of the bad things that happened to the Jedi over the centuries, particularly in things like the Knights of the Old Republic video games and in the Star Wars, the MMO, yeah, I mean, the Jedi, like particularly in Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Jedi were basically pushed to the brink of extinction and only managed to bounce back, barely managed to bounce back. And again, the same thing more or less happened in 500 years later in the Knights of the Old Republic MMO. I mean, if you play as a Jedi character, you can go and battle Imperials and Sith in the Jedi Temple who are there looting it. So the Jedi have, very good reasons to take the security of their temple, which is the heart of their order and their culture, their order, their culture, their religion. Basically, they have every reason to take that protecting that extremely seriously, because it's come close. The Jedi have been come close to being snuffed out more than once by the time this happens. So of course they're going to trust the protection of that to some of the toughest guys they have. And of course this whole thing with them dueling and the guards saying, like, look, we have to kill Ezra before he falls to the dark side. It just sort of plays into what's going on with Kanan. That we have to remember, Kanan, when Order 66 went down, he was only like 14 years old. He was just a Padawan, and this whole time he sort of felt like he's kind of in a way an imposter. He's not really a Jedi Master. He's not really a Jedi Knight. And that him teaching Ezra is not something that he really has the proper right to do. And we've seen so far that, Kanan's made his mistakes, but in general, he's done quite well with Ezra. But we have to forget, Kanan was raised in the Jedi Order. And the Jedi did have their rules, their traditions, their beliefs as to how these sort of things were properly done. And Kanan, that would have been what he grew up with his entire life. So, despite the circumstances, you can't just shake something like that off. It's understandable that he would, in a lot of ways, feel like a fraud from what he's doing. But here, he just kind of comes to accept that it's like, you know what? I really am his mentor here. I really do. I really am going to take this properly and seriously. I'm not going to let my doubts consume me anymore. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that Ezra does not fall to the dark side. And this, of course, proves him being worthy of being knighted. And it's so cool that they use the actual dialogue, word for word, from the knighting ceremony from the old Gennady Tartakovsky Clone Wars TV show. And then, of course, it turns out that the person who's doing all of this is the Inquisitor, or at least a vision of him, and heavily being implied that he was, before Order 66 went down, one of these temple guards, and that he himself was apparently corrupted by the Empire or the Emperor or whatever. Order 66 went down, he somehow survived and was corrupted, fell to the dark side, became part of the Inquisitorius. Now, in the old EU, it was a little ambiguous as to exactly what happened to, you know, Sith and other evil Force users when they died. The Jedi, of course, believed that they became part of. Did they just return to the Force? The same with other living beings. Other times in the old EU, it sort of basically said that, you know, evil Force users were more or less dragged down to chaos, which is basically just saying dragged down into hell, and you know that was that for them. Other times it was, again, just more like, yeah, they go back to the Force too. Personally, I always like the idea of more, yeah, you know, good, evil, you return to the Force. But the question has to be, well, are we really seeing who the Inquisitor is, or is this just the Force showing Kanan what he needs to see in order to get where he needs to go? And it was really nice that if you pay attention to what's going on with the guard, you know, his body language, the way he speaks, the way, you know, Kanan and he salute each other, the same. It's all stuff that like Kanan before he dueled the Inquisitor in Fire Across the Galaxy. That's exactly what happened. They saluted each other using the Makashi style. Um, and again, the way his body language, the way he speaks, very reminiscent of the Inquisitor. And yet, when he takes off the mask, it's just like, oh my god, it's him! And then you're hit with all this information. It's just like, whoa. I mean, I totally did not imagine that we were going to see Jason Isaacs on this show ever again in a million years. And this completely blindsided me. I love it. It makes perfect sense. But just good stuff there. Now, Ezra getting to talk to Yoda. I mean, this is something that's happened before, and they acknowledge that. And he's just like, okay, wow, this time I can see you. And Yoda, you know, warns Ezra, you know, you're getting more powerful in the Force, but you're also exposing yourself to more danger. I mean, he sees probably more than a little bit of Anakin in Ezra. You know, this young guy seems like a good person, obviously gifted in the Force, but somebody who's had a lot of pain in their life. And, you know, given what happened last time, obviously Yoda does not want this poor kid to go down the same road. And what's really interesting is, you know, Ahsoka's comments about how as the Clone Wars dragged on, Yoda seemed to carry a great burden. Well, at first thought is that, you know, just the idea of seeing all these Jedi die and, you know, all the suffering that's going across the galaxy, well, of course that's going to weigh heavily on a guy like Yoda, who's someone who really reveres life and holds it sacred. But here Yoda really expands on it a lot and basically says, like, yeah, I mean, the Jedi, we opened ourselves to corruption when we agreed to become the generals in this war, and, you know, really went down this path of violence. And of course, you can also take that as him sort of acknowledging the always extremely controversial choice the Jedi did make of agreeing to command the clone army, which in a lot of ways was basically a slave army. I mean, the clones really didn't have a choice to say, yeah, I don't want to fight in the Grand Army of the Republic after all. I mean, they were literally bred for that, and they really did not have a choice in the matter. And this is all extraordinarily against the principles of the Republic, who are essentially meant to be a galactic democracy, a parliament. Well, they use the term Senate, but details, details. Um, Now, in all fairness, the Jedi taking up this role was a choice the Jedi made extremely reluctantly, and there were some Jedi who just flat out said, "I'm not going to take part of this," and just refused to have anything to do with that. There were even at least one or two Jedi, I think Count Dooku was one of them, who even left the Jedi Order over this decision. But the decision was made nonetheless. The Jedi did make an extremely ethically questionable choice, and Yoda, I think now all these years realizes like we made the wrong choice. We chose expediency over what was right. Or expediency, pragmatism, call it whatever you want. The Jedi did something that even they knew was more than a little bit wrong, and ultimately that's what led to their destruction. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? And this, of course, brings us to Ahsoka's vision, where she's has these visions of Anakin saying, like, "Hey, Ahsoka, it's your fault. You weren't there for me when I needed you, and this led me to becoming this monster." Now, this is almost certainly has nothing to really do with Vader himself. There's no way this is not Ahsoka's just her guilt, her own guilt manifested. I mean, Mace Windu, Obi-Wan, and even Padme herself could not turn Anakin back. Even Padme couldn't do that. Anakin freaking force choked her. So yeah, there's nothing Ahsoka could have done that would have turned Anakin away from this. All it was is that she probably would have just gotten herself killed if she'd been around then. And it is interesting that she says, like, the last time I saw him, he was rushing off to save the Chancellor, which would refer to the events of immediately before Revenge of the Sith. Last time we saw Ahsoka, she was walking away from the Jedi Temple. At least, I think so. I haven't actually sit down and watched that final Netflix episode of Clone Wars. I really need to get on that. Anyway, let's see what else. Um, oh yeah, at the end of it, we're all given this information. It's just like, hey, you need to go to Malachor. Now, as I said, this is something from the old EU. Um, Knights of the Old Republic 2, there's this planet Malachor 5, which is really, really an important place. And I don't want to spoil it because, I don't know what they're going to do with that in the next episode, how closely they're going to stick with the old expanded universe on that. But, oh man, uh, I'm so hoping they somehow manage to work in like a reference to something like Bastila Shan or Darth Revan. Because Bastila Shan and Darth Revan are both pretty awesome characters. And if they were to ever, like officially be anointed as proper Star Wars canon, oh, I would just be over the moon. And because Knights of the Old Republic and Knights of the Old Republic 2 are probably easily some of the best Star Wars video games ever. And repeatedly in these reviews, you've heard me talk about how much I enjoy Star Wars: The Old Republic. So yeah, and in fact, I actually just saw this video today. Like somebody is remaking Knights of the Old Republic using, I guess, the latest version of the Unreal Engine, and they just put some video of it out today, and it looks amazing, absolutely amazing. Um, and remember, these are all BioWare games, so you know that it's some top-notch stuff. But yeah, and of course, everything ends with Vader and the Inquisitors coming into the Lothal Temple, and Vader's all like, "Oh, the Emperor's really gonna be pleased about this." Oh, well, yeah, he probably is. Getting your hands on a Jedi temple and whatever might be contained in that, yeah, the Emperor is gonna be pretty damn happy about that because, again, a big part of one of the main things in the old EU is that when Order 66 went down, the Emperor sent his goons in there to loot the Jedi Temple of all of its knowledge and artifacts, and doubtlessly that gave him a big, big leg up in securing his future power. Um, Other stuff. Well, it was definitely cool to see, Clone Wars era Anakin on the holocron, talking about his lightsaber style, and again, just the whole thing of a holocron with Anakin Skywalker on it. I mean, that just ooh, I love holocrons. I love holocrons. They're so cool. Um, and again, having all the old voice actors, Frank Oz, James Earl Jones, everybody coming back for this episode. It's just like, oh man, this is such good stuff. I mean, season 1 of this show was really good, but season 2 they insanely stepped up. Um, also really like those little flying critters that they used to get away from at the beginning of the episode. Again, in Star Wars: The Old Republic, there's a creature that's very similar looking to that you can actually use as transportation on, of all places, Alderaan. So yeah, guys, good stuff this episode. Anyway, I have nothing else to say, so I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and please join me on Tumblr as well at Jedi Reviewer. Till next time, take care and have a good one.